Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... At last, the time has come for me to do my first book haul video for this channel. Now, granted, I have done book haul videos before on TikTok, but those have honestly been nothing more than showing off a book cover while having some music play in the background. And it really isn't something that I've gone into detail over. But since I recently turned 39 and my husband took me over to Jackson, Mississippi to celebrate my birthday, I decided since we hit up every single bookstore we could come across, this would be a perfect time to show off the books that I bought on that day and to also show off the books that were gifted to me. So, yeah, the first slot of books I'm going to show off is going to be from a used bookstore that we went to called The Book Rack. And this is a bookstore that we've gone to for quite a few years because the owners are just absolutely amazing. They are as sweet as can be. They're very welcoming. And even though their store is organized, there's just enough chaos to it so you can have the joys of digging through the genres that you're interested in to find those hidden gems. So, as I was looking around, the first book I came across was Hammer's Own Bone by Cassandra Call. Now, I recently did a TBR video and I featured Nothing But Blackened Teeth in that video, which I've yet to read anything full-length by this author, but I did read one of the author's short stories that was featured in When Things Get Dark, which I absolutely love that story. So from there, I started building a little collection of this author's work. Now, in that video, I had accidentally called the author she and her, and it was brought to my attention that the author is actually non-binary, so they go by pronouns like they and them. And I really appreciate that being brought to my attention so I don't make the same mistake again. But when I came across this book, it looked like it was a lot of fun, and of course, I needed it for my library. And I do like to go into things as blind as I possibly can, but I did read the first paragraph to see that this is definitely going to be fun, as it seems like the story is about a 10-year-old who hires a private investigator to murder his abusive stepfather, which the investigator takes on cases that are paranormal based, supernatural based, what have you. And it appears that perhaps the little boy's stepfather isn't entirely human. So I think this is going to be fun. It looks like it's going to be a very short read, and I just can't wait to dive in. Another book I found was John Saul's The Presence. Now, let me tell you something about John Saul. An entire summer during my childhood, I did nothing but read his books, and I loved every single one of them. Like, yeah, I know he follows a similar formula with every book, but I don't care. I really enjoy his characters. The whole creep factor is always there for me, and they are just good old-fashioned supernatural fun. And yeah, this is the kind of book that I would go to if I had just read something where I had to really think hard about it and I just wanted a cleanser. Saul was a perfect cleanser for me. And in the case of that one summer, I just needed a whole summer of nothing but cleansing. So Saul totally saved my life that year. Now, I really don't know what to expect with this work, but as I zoomed through the synopsis, I saw that it takes place in Hawaii, which I know that Saul had lived in Hawaii for a while. And at the same time, I've honestly never read a horror book that takes place in Hawaii, so this will be fun. And I think that this will probably be a good book to read during the summer for that reason, because I imagine it's going to be nice, warm, tropical, all of that good stuff. But as I was reading on, I noticed where this book is in regards to an evil that gets unearthed and it terrorizes a place in Hawaii, which sounds simple. I'm sure it's going to follow the same formula that I'm used to with Saul, and I'm sure I'm going to get some characters that I enjoy. Another book that I was totally happy to find was Christopher Buehlman's The Lesser Dead. Now, here's the thing about Buehlman. I've only read one of his books, but that was enough for me to start stocking up my bookshelf with the rest of his titles. And whenever I can get my hands on one of his books, I'm totally going to do it. And this is one that I had been wanting to grab for a while, but it finally just landed in my hands. I don't really know what to expect, except this is a vampire book, and normally vampires don't creep me out. However, a few years ago, I read his book, Those Across the River, and even though it was a werewolf book and werewolves don't scare me or anything like that, that book actually scared the piss out of me. And I mean, it still haunts me to this day. And what really gets me about Buehlman is he's a very comedic person. Like, if you go to his Facebook, he has like all of these hilarious posts. But if you read one of his books, there is nothing funny whatsoever in his work. And if this is anything like Those Across the River, I know I'm definitely going to have some sleepless nights. The next book I'm going to show off is one where when I saw it, I ran over to Carrie, just clinging onto this for dear life, and I almost crapped myself right there in the bookstore because I was so tickled pink. Now, when I was a kid, I read the 3 books that are compiled together in this one collection, and I was blown away by them. Like, there were some stories in there where I'm like, what the hell did I just read? And from there, I always wanted a hardback. And lo and behold, this last weekend, Books of Blood by Clive Barker. Now, this is part 1 through 3 in the same book, and oh my god, it's like in perfect condition too. Like, I can't get over how good this is, and it was only 10 bucks. Like, you cannot beat that. And even though I have this in paperback, I'm like, yep, time to upgrade, and upgrade I did. Now, if you've never read this collection, there are some stories in this that will knock you for a loop. Like, these are so damned original. And some of the best stories that stand out to me are like Rawhead Rex, Dread, The Midnight Meat Train, The Madonna, In the Hills, The Cities, just... And that's only listing a few, but oh my god. If you have never read Splatterpunk and you want to try Splatterpunk, I feel like this is definitely the gateway drug right here. The next book is one by an author who I feel like I should have already read, but I haven't done it yet. And that is The Forbidden Zone by Whitley Strieber. Now, I know that Strieber has out books that are more popular than this title because I've not heard anyone ever mention this title, but I know his books like The Wolf Inn, Cat Magic, The Hunger, I know those are considered his classics. And I do think that he is a very interesting author because I had heard tell that he was destined to be the next Stephen King, but his alleged alien abduction sent him in a different direction with his work than just continuing to focus on horror. But from my understanding, his horror books are very solid. This one is about an evil that's been laying dormant under a mound, and it gets loose and terrorizes a community. So, yeah, I mean, it seems like it's been done before. As a matter of fact, it sounds very similar to the Saul book that I just mentioned, but I think that there's going to be enough differences here with character, setting, and plot that it will definitely be its own thing. And I really, really do want to read something by him sooner than later, and I just I don't know where to really start with him. I think that when the time comes, I might go for The Hunger. But it could be this book. Not too certain. If anyone has read this author before, just leave a comment on what a good starting point is with his work. Another book I found was Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. Now, I haven't really heard too much about this book, but I have seen it float around in a few Facebook groups, and from my understanding, it's a collection of feminist horror. And out of the short stories in here, I've heard tell that there's one about a prom dress, and then there's another one that, if you're a fan of Law and Order, you would enjoy that. But collectively, the stories focus on the horrors that women undergo as far as their bodies are concerned. And I don't know how much body horror is going to be in this, but body horror freaks me the hell out, but at the same time, I love it. And I really think that this is going to be a good diversity of horror stories. I think that maybe this would be ideal to read for like Mother's Day or something like that. But yeah, I think this is going to be a great opportunity to see diversity. Up next is another horror author who I feel like I should have read by now, but I just haven't. And that is Bentley Little. Now, his book, The Disappearance, sounds pretty cut and dry. It's about a guy who is searching for his girlfriend who went missing. And as he's trying to find her, he discovers that there is a group of perhaps people known as the Outsiders who are involved with her being gone. I'm not certain if the Outsiders are actual people or if they're creatures or exactly what's going on here, but it says, hours from civilization in the middle of nowhere, what could possibly go wrong? Well, yeah, there's a lot of shit that's going to go wrong, I'm sure. And while speaking of that author, this is another book I found by him called The Dispatch. And from what I gather from its synopsis is it's about a guy who is able to manifest into reality whatever he wishes by writing it down. And because of this, he has had a string of great jobs. He's had like good schools and just whatever. He's had a good life because of what he's written down. And on this one particular day, he ends up getting a job that is his dream job, but this is where the gravy train stops because something sinister has trapped him here, I believe, and it's going to be a showdown between him and the opposing force. So yeah, not necessarily certain what to expect on why he has these abilities, but it seems like it could be fun. It seems very Stephen Kingish. As a matter of fact, Stephen King and Dean Koontz have both praised this author, so I imagine it is going to be creepy and probably very suspenseful. And while speaking of Little, here is another of his books called The Influence. And here's the thing. When I'm reading over the synopsis, I see there's very little given away. Get it? Very little given away. Yeah, dad joke. Yeah, I suck. Anyway, with the synopsis to this one, it seems like this is going to be a small town horror where there is like a string of natural disasters, then children go missing, people lose their mind, and from there things just get progressively worse until the evil that's surrounding their town is taking over entirely. So, not necessarily certain what the motive is behind all of that, but I do feel like this is going to be a fun and interesting read. The last book I have by Bentley Little is The Walking. And pretty much the synopsis explains that this is about an investigator who is investigating a group of individuals that are known as walkers. I don't really know anything more than that. perhaps they're skinwalkers. It would definitely be fun if this was a book about skinwalkers. I really haven't read any books on that subject, so hopefully this will change that for me. And I really do enjoy the cover of this one. It just seems badass. It kind of almost seems like a western, maybe a horror western, which I haven't really read any horror westerns. So that would be cool if it was in that neck of the woods as well. Next up is a book that totally came out of the 90s. I mean, there's no if, and, or but about it. I haven't even checked the publication date, but I guarantee you this is the 90s because look at this cover. I mean, that right there, it is not anything current, let me tell you. But as soon as I saw the cover, I knew I had to have this because it looked fun. Then when I opened it up and saw the contributors, actually 1994, that's the copyright date. The contributors are Amelia B. Edwards, Sir Walter Scott, Daniel Defoe, Algernon Blackwood, and Edith Wharton. Now, out of those authors, I've only read Algernon Blackwood and Edith Wharton. And Algernon Blackwood scares the hell out of me. Like, I know people love Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft, but I never hear anyone speak about Blackwood. And he is so damn creepy. Like, he takes the haunted house and puts it right out in the middle of nature, and he can make the most beautiful summer day seem absolutely dreadful. And I've read a few of his stories. I've enjoyed them all. Now, with Edith Wharton, I've only read one of her stories, and it was a Halloween-based story called All Souls, I think it was. I could be wrong on the title, but that story actually did scare me. It was about a woman who had stayed home on Halloween, and as the night was progressing into the following day, she discovered that all of her helpers were actually witches, and she was trapped in her mansion with them. So that was a lot of fun, and this, yeah, I mean, $3. You can't go wrong with $3. So I am going to have a lot of fun with this one. It's going to be a quick read. So I'm thinking this is just going to be something where one day I want to cuddle up on the couch and just pull out something nostalgic and try to scare myself. This next book is actually one that's been recommended to me, and I just haven't gotten around to buying a copy, but this last weekend changed that because I have The Ceremonies by t.e.d. Klein. Now, I really don't know what to gather of this because the synopsis is really vague, and it seems like this is going to be small town folk horror, cult horror, something like that. It sounds like it takes place over the summer, so this could be a very fun, creepy summer read. The person who recommended it to me, I have their name written down, so when I review this book, I can give them a shout out, but I cannot recall the name right now. However, the person who recommended this, I do know the same individual has recommended other books to me that I've read, and I've thoroughly enjoyed them. So this is something that I am looking forward to. Also, Stephen King gives it a good shout out here by saying that it's an exciting novel and it's something that he's comparing to Peter Straub's Ghost Story, which I absolutely love Ghost Story, and that's one of the few books I've read that scared the hell out of me. So if this is anything like that book, yeah, I'm in for a night of no sleep and leaving the light on and the curtains pulled. And the last book that I found at the used bookstore was Billy by Whitley Strieber. And this is back when they used to do this really cool cutout on the front of book covers, so when you open it up, there would be another image inside. So I wish they would get back to doing that more. I really liked that concept. It was definitely a lot of fun for the time it existed. And from what I gather from the synopsis of this book, it is simply about a young boy who is kidnapped, and it becomes a cat and mouse tale of him trying to escape. And the praise for this book is from quite a few diverse celebrities. Like at the top, we have Mary Higgins Clark, who says, terrifying, heart pounding suspense. Then Peter Straub says, an amazingly gripping book, a knockout. Which, in my opinion, those two authors alone are similar with being suspenseful, but at the end of the day, one is horror, one is murder mystery. Then we have a director here, Oliver Stone, saying an enthralling heroic tale. And this is the one that really gets me. This is William S. Burroughs, who says a superb tour de force of suspense. So, yeah, that's a lot of different praise from many walks of life. So I feel like this is going to be one of those white knuckle books. I feel like it's definitely going to have me on the edge of my seat. And of course, anytime a child is in danger, it does make me feel uncomfortable. But I think this is going to be something that just really stands out. And I'm hoping that the antagonist will get his in the end. Now to move on to the books that were gifted to me. And first up is The Mummy by Anne Rice. Now, as I mentioned in my TBR video, I'm currently reading her book called The Witching Hour, and I love it to death. It's my second time reading it, but unfortunately it's just taking me a while because my day job ends up just turning my brain to mush by the time I get home, so I really can't focus for long periods of time. I really need to work on that and try to focus for longer periods, but it is what it is. Now, funny story, this book had actually been recommended to me when I was a little kid by a friend of mine who owned a used bookstore. And I don't know why I never read it, but she swore up and down that this book was absolutely terrifying, which I'll give it to Anne Rice. Like, there's some parts in The Witching Hour that are just nightmare fuel. And as I read the Vampire Chronicles, I read maybe 4 of those books back in the day. I'd like to read them again and finish off the entire series. But there were some scenes, especially in the Vampire Lestat, where I was like, whoa, whoa. So Anne Rice is totally one of those authors who, when she wants to take you there, she can totally do it. And to be perfectly honest, I've always wanted to read a book about mummies, but I've never done it, and this is really the only one that I'm aware of. If y'all know of any other horror books that are based around mummies, please leave them in the comments because I am interested. But this is something where if I could get my hands on the hardback, I would upgrade in a heartbeat. But looking around on eBay, that hardback is definitely out of my pay grade. And of course, if I'm going to get The Mummy, this person was kind enough to also gift me the sequel, which was written by Anne Rice and Christopher Rice, and this is The Passion of Cleopatra. Now, I honestly haven't heard anything about this book. I haven't heard if it's good, if it's bad, if it's frightening like how the first one was. But I am happy to have this because I'm a completist, and also I have read Christopher Rice before. Back when I was in high school, I read his book, A Density of Souls, which was really good. I feel like it will hit differently if I read it again now as an adult. But this is going to be a lot of fun just to simply see him and his mom writing together, and I'm glad that they were able to share this opportunity before she passed away. And rounding off that trilogy is Ramsays the Damned, The Reign of Osiris. I have no idea what in the hell to expect with this book. I've not heard anyone say it's good. I've not heard anyone say it's bad. I haven't heard anything. And I don't want to read the synopsis because I'm afraid it might give away some spoilers, like it might reveal the death of someone who was in one of the previous books, and I just want to go into it blindly. But if you do happen to load up my comments with what to expect with this trilogy, just please, no spoilers, let me know what you thought. And I would much rather hear from you versus going on to Amazon or Goodreads and just browsing through reviews, because a lot of times when you browse through reviews like that, people normally are pretty good about putting spoiler alert before they reveal it, but other times not so much. So, yeah, please be kind with that, and if you have read this, load up the comments. This next book is one that had been recommended to me by my good friend Oliver Tilley, and that is Pen Pal by Dathan Albach. I know I'm saying that wrong. I think this book is about a pen pal friendship that goes horribly wrong. The person who is the protagonist is writing a friend, or who they believe is a friend, and the friend ends up being a complete stalker. I think that's what happens here, or reading in between the lines of what I've seen people say about it online, that kind of sounds like what it is. Now, my good friend Oliver says that this book was scary as hell, and I've actually heard other people say this was an absolutely terrifying book. So I'm excited for that. I don't know how graphic it becomes, so if you are easily triggered over perhaps what could be a kidnapping, or I don't know if there's any sexual abuse in this, but if you are triggered by certain subjects like that, this is probably going to be the book to check on before you read it, to like just simply do a quick little Google. And yeah, I've heard this book is pretty infamous as being something that kicks you in the butt. So this is definitely going to be an experience, I do believe. Up next is an author who I feel is criminally underrated, and that is Tananarive Due. Now, with this book, The Wishing Pool, this is actually her second collection of short stories. Her first collection is called Ghost Summer, which I haven't read that book yet, but I have read her other books, such as The Between, The Good House, and Joplin's Ghost, all of which I thoroughly enjoyed. And what I really love about her work is you can tell she does her research before she does her writing. And her books and stories are so very hard hitting. Like, if you are not expecting it, you are going to get hit hard. And I mean, she doesn't really deal with gore and brutality and stuff like that, but the psychological aspects that come with her work are definitely ones that will stay with you for a long time. Next up is an author who I've been meaning to read more of, and that is Paul Tremblay. Now, his book, The Beast You Are, is a collection of short stories, and I have read a couple of his short stories before, which I really enjoyed. But the book of his that I absolutely loved, it scared the hell out of me, and it made me sob like a baby, was The Cabin at the End of the World. And granted, the movie was all right. I wish it would have had that devastating ending that the book did, which I'm not going to reveal how devastating the ending is. Just know that the movie adaptation is a happy ending. The book, no. It it's terrifying. So I am very excited to read this. I know that some of the short stories I've read by him have open endings to them, which I don't mind the open ending format because it makes you think, and sometimes not knowing is scarier than knowing. Following that is a book by one of my favorite contemporary authors, which is Bad Astronauts by Grady Hendrix. And judging by the synopsis, this doesn't really sound like the typical Hendrix book, which I say typical, I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just that with Hendrix, he mixes together humor, heart, and horror pretty well. I've enjoyed his books such as My Best Friend's Exorcism, The Final Girl Support Group, How to Sell a Haunted House. I do still need to read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I think that's what it's called. It's on my TBR. I also need to read Horror Store, and I totally need to read We Sold Our Souls, which that's on my TBR as well. But with this one, it seems like it's going to be more of a satirical comedy, and it seems to be about an astronaut who gets stuck in space, and because of NASA having its budget cut, no one wants to do anything to help out. And the cousin of the astronaut who's stuck in space is a retired from NASA, I believe, and he decides that he is going to take matters into his own hands and rescue his cousin. So, yeah, that sounds pretty serious, but by how the synopsis is described, where his land becomes like this safe haven for misfits and outcast and everything, it seems like there's going to be quite a bit of comedy with this. I could be wrong, but I also feel like the reason why there's going to be a lot of comedy is Bad Astronauts. It really just kind of sounds funny. So I think this will definitely not be a horror book. Could be wrong, but I'll let you know. The next book I'm about to show off is one that has produced two movies that I have really enjoyed, which I say two movies, but in all honesty, it's an original and a remake. And the book is called The Mid Witch Cuckoos by John Wyndham, which inspired the movies Village of the Damned. And this is sci-fi horror. I totally am not a fan of sci-fi unless there are horror elements. But as far as like hardcore sci-fi, it just doesn't do anything for me. But yeah, bring in some creepy kids and some horror, and it can be as sci-fi as it wants as long as I get my horror fix. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the concept of this story, it takes place in a small village where everyone blacks out one day, and when they wake up, all of the women are pregnant, and they end up giving birth to children that have blonde hair and blue eyes, and it's revealed that the children have special powers. From there, the story just becomes more and more crazy. I don't know how true the movies are to the book. I am happy to finally have this, and I think it is going to be a lot of fun. I have his other book, Day of the Triffids, which my husband read and absolutely loved. Again, that's a movie I've seen. I haven't read the book, but hopefully sooner than later I can knock these two babies out, because sometimes when the mood hits, sci-fi horror can definitely pull me in. Next up is a book by one of my favorite authors, Shirley Jackson, and this is her book, The Bird's Nest. Now, I haven't really heard too many people speak about this book, but I am a huge fan of The Haunting of Hill House. I loved We Have Always Lived in the Castle, and The Lottery still freaks me out to this day. So she definitely has a way of grabbing me and holding my attention, and I think this one is going to be a psychological book. I mean, most of her books are psychological anyway, but from my understanding, this one is about a woman who suffers from migraines and body aches, and when she goes to the doctor, he discovers that she has multiple personalities, and all of them are destructive. And I could be wrong about this, but it kind of seems like this is the basis for a lot of different movies and books that kind of follow that same idea. And I will be very excited to see exactly where this goes and to see if it scares me, because still to this day, The Haunting of Hill House creeps me the hell out. Following that is one of the paperbacks from Hell books, Rapture, and this is by Thomas Tessier. Now, as far as the synopsis is concerned, this kind of seems like it's going to be your run-of-the-mill stalker story where a man is obsessed with a woman and he stalks her, her husband, and their teenage daughter. I don't really know what's going to be presented with this story that makes it stand out from the rest, but with the idea of this being a Paperbacks from Hell book, I totally had to have it because I have a good collection going on with the Paperbacks from Hell, where every time one's released, I grab a copy or I ask for a copy for my birthday or Christmas. So yeah, even if this is something that has been repeated time and time again, I feel like I will still enjoy it simply for the fact that it could be a good cat and mouse book. Up next is another Paperbacks from Hell book, which is Finishing Touches by Thomas Tessier. And this sounds like it's going to be a lot more fun than the other book I showed off. It seems that it's about two doctors, one male, one female, who end up having a sexual relationship. As the relationship becomes more intense, the male doctor discovers that the female doctor has a basement of secrets that goes horribly wrong. And I'm kind of thinking this is going to be body horror. I'm hoping that she is absolutely insane and she experiments on humans because I love a good old-fashioned crazy doctor story, and I'm hoping this one will deliver. Another book that was gifted to me is a part of the Tales from Between collection, which is Samantha Koyesnik's Lonesome Haunts. And I really don't know what to expect with this because the description, there isn't one. There's no synopsis here. And even as I browse through, like, there is no synopsis at all. But this is a collection of short stories. There's going to be 5 in here. And as you can see, this will be a really short read. And I absolutely love Samantha Koyesnik's book True Crime. It had been out of print for a while, but it is back in print. If you have not read that book, definitely check it out. But at the same time, trigger warnings, because there is animal abuse in there, and it is child abuse, as well as sexual abuse. So if those are subjects that you don't care to read about, you might want to skip True Crime. Otherwise, the book is absolutely phenomenal, and it ended up making me cry when I read it. So, aside from that, I haven't read anything else by Koesnik, and I do have a few other of her books. I do honestly need to change that sooner than later because she is such a great author. Up next is Gilded Needles by Michael McDowell. Now, here's the thing. Michael McDowell is the guy who wrote Beetlejuice and The Nightmare Before Christmas, so it goes without saying that his work is really, really awesome. And a few years ago, I had the opportunity to read his book, The Elementals, which I absolutely fell in love with. And after reading it, I said that I was going to expand my collection on his titles, and so that's something I'm still working on. Now, as far as Gilded Needles is concerned, I don't believe this is based in the South like how The Elementals was, but this is something that takes place in the Victorian era from my understanding, and it is about a judge who sentences a woman's family to death or to receive some type of punishment for some of the things they may or may not have done. And in response to that, she ends up mailing the judge and all of his family members death certificates with their names on it, or, you know, some type of obituary with their names on it. But from there, it becomes a game of absolute just going back and forth, cat and mouse, good old-fashioned revenge. So I absolutely love a good old revenge story, and it seems like this one is definitely going to serve it up. Another book I received is The Amulet by Michael McDowell. So this book takes place in the South, which, if it's anything like how the Elementals were, then I know we're in for some good old-fashioned Southern Gothic storytelling. And, of course, this is specifically a book that takes place in Alabama, which the author was from Alabama until he passed away. But from my understanding, this book is about a woman who's married to a man who goes into a comatose state after he's been in an accident. And while she's dealing with that, she's also coping with his irate mom. And as the story progresses, the man's mother gives an amulet to the man who she thinks is responsible for her son's current state. From there, a string of deaths plague the area for those who could possibly be involved. Next up is Ryan C. Thomas, Born to Bleed. Now, I still need to read the first book in this series. This is part 2. The first book is called The Summer I Died, and I have heard nothing but good things about that book. And there's one more book after this one, and that's it. I think it's just nothing more than a trilogy here. But I've seen these books float around on Facebook and TikTok, and from what I gather, they are extreme books. They're splatterpunk, they're gory as gory can be. And to be honest, I've tried to avoid finding out exactly what the second book is about, because until I read the first book, I don't want there to be any spoilers that have been given. So I will probably start reading these after I receive the third book, which I'll probably end up getting that eventually, either for a holiday or for a happy. But this is a trilogy that I'm really excited to read. If you have read it, definitely let me know what you think, but please no spoilers. Next up are a few books that I ordered online, and this is The Feast of All Saints by Anne Rice. Now, I've seen the movie. I really enjoyed the movie. I felt like it was very well done, and I think that the book is also going to be good. I don't think that this is going to be classified as horror, but I do feel like it definitely falls into the subgenre of Gothic literature, specifically Southern Gothic literature, as the story does focus on a group of people who are known as free people of color prior to the Civil War. And it just brings you into their life, and you just see how it is for them during that time. And so I remember the movie being dramatic. I don't really remember there being any horrific elements to it, except the idea of just that time in general being horrific. And if this ends up being a drama like how the movie was, I'm probably just going to read it in my own time, but I don't think I'll review it because I really try to reserve this channel for horror books or books that are gothic horror. So I do think this is going to be a good book. I don't think it's going to fall into the category for me to review on here, which that's very similar to when I read Cry to Heaven by Anne Rice. It was a good book. I enjoyed it. It felt like a Shakespearean drama to me. And of course, she brought the characters and setting to life. But at the end of the day, the book just felt like Gothic literature. It didn't feel like horror. So even though I did enjoy that book, I didn't feel like it was right for this channel. Up next is The Damn Thing, Weird and Ghostly Tales by Ambrose Bierce. Now, I've never read Bierce before, and I've been wanting to for quite some time. I've heard nothing but good things about him, and this is a collection of 11 stories where I feel like I'll have a pretty good idea of what he's capable of. And with these stories, as I was browsing through the synopsis, one story is about a murder that occurs, and it's seen in repetition from different perspectives. Another one is about a man who is terrorized by an evil spirit. Another one's about a man who meets his fate in an abandoned house. And then there's one about a werepanther. So it doesn't necessarily say what the other stories are about, but I have heard that his particular story, The Damn Thing, is probably his most popular. And this is something that as soon as I saw the cover, I knew I had to get it because the cover is awesome, and I feel like it complements another book I have with a similar cover, which is Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu, which I really loved Carmilla. And This is just something that I think will look very lovely next to that book, and it is something that I do hope to read sooner than later, and I kind of have a feeling this might actually scare me. Next up is the fourth book in the My Dark Library collection, which has been curated by Sadie Hartman, who is one of the founders behind Nightworms. And that book is Taboo in Four Colors by Tim McGregor. Now, this book is something that I really haven't heard much about, but by reading over the synopsis a little, it appears that the story is about a comic artist who creates for a writer that he has never met because the writer is reclusive and just meets his deadlines from home. But when the writer starts missing deadlines, the artist goes to his home to find out what's going on, and things become crazy from there. So, I have not read Tim McGregor before, but I absolutely love the cover of this. By the way, the covers of these books have been a lot of fun. I haven't read any of them yet. I need to change that. And I don't know why I haven't read them, but they're all very thin, and hopefully sooner than later, because to be perfectly honest, I would absolutely love to just sit down and read all of these books together, just back to back to back. So I'll definitely make time for that soon. Following that is Michael McDowell's Blackwater. Now, this big ass book was originally released as a 6-book serial back in the 80s. And all I really know about it is it takes place in Alabama around Easter, and it follows a massive flood that has taken over a town. Well, after the flood is over, people return, and they discover that there was a girl left behind who endured the flood. From there, she becomes an urban legend where things go from creepy to absolutely scary as hell. And the thing is, I'm going to take the cover off to this book so you can see it in its full glory because it's absolutely beautiful. Like, check that out. Love it. Love it. I wish more books were released with that front and back cover like that. That's just, love it. So, yeah, I'm expecting that is going to be some good old Southern Gothic horror right there. And last but not least, even though I'm really not a comic book person or a graphic novel person, when I saw this, I had no other choice but to say yes. Which this is Tales from the Crypt Volume 1, and it's the Archives collection, which has a foreword in it by John Carpenter. And yeah, even though I wasn't actually born when Tales from the Crypt was originally circulating, I remember how these comics resurfaced in the 90s, and for some reason I didn't take care of them. I guess as a kid, I just didn't know the value of what I had. And this is something that I am totally going to have a lot of fun with. It feels like this is made out of good material. We have the classic artwork and everything in there. So, yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. And of course, since I got that, I had to go in and slam money down for Volume 2, which this one has a foreword by Joe Dante. And very much like Volume 1 that I held up, it's the good old-fashioned artwork and the comics, and yeah, just a lot of fun. And I believe that volumes 3 and 4 are soon to be released, so obviously when those become available, I'm adding them to my collection. Well, that's my birthday book haul. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. I do have a few more presents that I'm expecting from friends that I just haven't had the opportunity to meet up with. And of course, I'll definitely share that as well as soon as I receive those presents, whatever they may be. So, I hope you enjoyed this, and now that we're at the end of this video, I would like to say thank you to these amazing people for contributing to my Patreon account. As you can tell, some of the names listed here are creators, so be sure to check out their work. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon account, I have a link available in the description section of this episode, where for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos. And if there is a certain profession you would like for me to tie to your name, just let me know and I'll do that. Also, I do have a $10 tier available, where for $10 a month, I'll still give you the shout out as you see here, but I do creepy photography on the side, so at the beginning of every month, I send out one of my creepy photos. From there, you can print it off and do whatever you like with it. So if you're able to do this, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you return to this channel so we can continue to have a good time together. Also, if you would like to hit me up on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram are all available in the description section of this episode. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell because I do have more videos and book reviews coming in the near future. So until we see each other again, I hope you have a great night and sweet nightmares.